All right. Good morning, everybody.
Good morning again.
Gemara Brochos, Perek Test, chapter 9. We're still in the middle of the Mishnah. So yesterday we were saying, we said quite a lot actually. We were discussing about the how we have to bless for the good with the same sincerity. In other words, recognizing that's part of Hashem's plan as we bless the not so good, and we have to bless the not so good, or at least seemingly not so good, with the same enthusiasm as we bless what's good. And then we discussed that we can't pray over something that's already happened. It's a wasted prayer. It's a prayer in vain that's happened already. Now, so we gave the example, God forbid there was a screaming from the city, and someone starts praying, please don't let that be my house. Well, whichever house it is, it's already in the process. That's what's happened. Then we discussed about going to somewhere that's not safe and praying before we enter, before we leave, as we leave, or before and after. And then we discussed, we brought up again this concept of blessing Hashem for the bad with the same enthusiasm or in the same way as we bless for the good. And we brought a source. And the source is the first verse of the Shema. And just letting someone in. Okay. All right, this is the first all right. The first verse of Shema. And where it says that we should love Hashem with all our hearts, right? As we said, that means both the Yetzer Hara and the Yetzer Tov, the good and evil inclination, the animal soul, the bodily soul, and with all our life, meaning if God forbid if we have to even be willing to give up our life, and v'chol moedecha. We're in the middle of that. Was two explanations that the Mishnah gives. They're not arguing; they're complementary. It means with all our financial resources, and also all of our talents and energies and
Good morning.
Morning and every morning, right? Whatever we have, so we put everything into our Judaism. Well, it's now when it says b'chol moedecha, with everything. So what does it mean? B'chol midah shel moedecha. As well as meaning all your financial resources and all your energies. It also means that whatever midah, whatever way that Hashem measures out to you, whether that's positive or, God forbid, has the appearance of negative, you should thank Him. So this is one of the sources. You see that we're meant to thank Hashem regardless of how it appears. And just to point out, I emphasized how it appears. Right? There's a famous story of about the Maggid Mezrich that in his lifetime, if there was something that seemingly wasn't good for the Jewish people, he would put a lot of effort into praying and beseeching the Hashem that the situation should change. And after his passing, one of his students was trying to pray that something that wasn't going well for the Jewish people should be changed, and he was unable to. And he sort of transcended his consciousness to a higher spiritual level, and he met the soul of the Maggid. the Maggid Medrash, and he asked him to also pray. So he tells him, I can't. So he says, but when you're in this world, you're always prayed to change things. And he says, that's because in the physical world, I perceived it as the physical world does, and therefore it appeared negative. He says, now I'm in the world of truth. I see how it's really ultimately good. It's part of the plan. And therefore I can't sincerely pray for it to change anymore. Right? So this is also part of the idea that ultimately everything is good. All right, new clause in the Mishnah. Any questions before we move on? Yes, Ben.
It sounds the same as muzzle. Muzzle can be good and could be bad. Some people think that it's only for the good, muzzle.
Right. Well, muzzle is a whole discussion on its own.
Right.
Muzzle is similar to the forces of nature that Hashem creates, the certain spiritual energies, and the conduits for spiritual energy come into the world. Now that energy comes into the world the way we perceive it can be positive or negative. The Jewish people, though, have the potential to go higher than muzzle, and not to be limited by muzzle. But yeah.
Okay.
Okay. Now it says, Lo yakel adam is roishai keneged shar hamizrach. A person shouldn't behave in a light-hearted way when he's opposite the eastern gate of the Temple Mount. Now, what's the relation here? Here we've been speaking about blessings and, a blessing and lightning, where there's a miracle, and all of a sudden we're speaking about how to behave near the Temple Mount. Doesn't seem to go together. Now, the connection is that till now, essentially, these blessings have been showing our awe to Hashem. Someone sees these majestic mountains, and he's just awe-inspired of the greatness of the Creator. So he says a blessing. Or there was a place where was a miracle. So again, it's all sort of showing a reverence, like a better word, such an awe and a respect to Hashem. So along those lines, when a person is at the eastern gate of the Temple Mount, he shouldn't behave, too lightheaded. Why the eastern gate? Other gate to another court.
You're freezing,
Rabbi. So all those gates, once again. Oh.
Rabbi, you're freezing.
Froze. Okay.
You're breaking
better now.
Out. You freeze and go out of it. Freeze and go out of it.
Okay. How is it better now?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Hopefully it's a one-off. We had a one-off this time yesterday. And then it worked. So we're saying that all the blessings till now have been about showing a reverence. It's like sort of awe to Hashem. And so this is the same idea, not being lightheaded, behaving, too casually opposite the eastern gate of the Temple Mount. Now, why the eastern gate? The eastern gate is level, or was directly opposite the gate of the Beis Mikdash itself, the main gate, which is directly opposite the gate of the Heichel, which is directly opposite the curtain, the entrance to the Holy of Holies. And if all those doors were open, then when you're opposite the eastern gate, you're essentially behaving lightheadedly directly in front of the Holy of Holies. So that's the issue. Just a side point to this, that was really only in the first temple. Right? In the second temple, it was a slightly different setup. When they went to build the second Beis Mikdash, it was unclear whether when you had the measurement of the room, did it include the wall, the thickness of the wall, or did it not include the thickness of the wall? So what they did is they had two entrances, right? So so do we end here? In which case there was one curtain, or do we end another amma further? In which case there was a second curtain. And because of these two thick curtains, you actually never open them both. They used to go in a small opening on one side, walk into the gap, and a small opening on the other side. So in the second temple, you never really had that issue per se that it can open up directly, but still. And from here, we get into the discussion of the Temple Mount and by extension, how we behave in a shul. And it says, Lo yikanes l'harabayis b'makloi, manaloi, or fundosoi. A person shouldn't enter the Temple Mount with his staff. We don't mean a walking stick that perhaps an older person uses that's necessary to walk. We mean, like his casual traveling staff, or with his shoes, right? In the holy places, we don't wear shoes, or with his money belt, right? All these things are like his day-to-day regular sort of business type behaviors. So it's not considered a proper respect for the Temple Mount. With dust upon his feet. I guess if you're walking bare feet, there's going to be a certain amount of dust, but no, it's not with dirty feet. Kapandaria, and we don't make the Temple Mount a shortcut. Instead of walking around, the person will say, "Oh, you know what? I'll go in one gate, cut through, and go out the gate the other side." Can't do that to the Temple Mount. It's not respectful. And how much more so a person shouldn't spit, right? That's not respectful. So these are generally the ways we behave in the shul as well. We shouldn't use the shul as a shortcut. So if a person for some reason needs to go through a shul to get somewhere, they should sit down for a moment, say a verse or learn something. We shouldn't do these things. Okay. Now, once we speak about the Beis HaMikdash, we're going to get to another slight discussion. And before we do, just want to give an introduction. In the second Beis HaMikdash, we had a problem with a few groups. So let's go back a step to the first Beis HaMikdash. The challenge spiritually in the first Beis HaMikdash was idol worship. Now, a lot of people can't understand today, why would people get excited about idol worship? Now, seemingly intelligent people, why would they bow down to a stone or something? The first thing to mention is that one of the things that Anshnei Knesset Gedolah, men of the Great Assembly, the people who built the second Beis HaMikdash, what they did is that they davened that the Yetzer Hara, the desire for idol worship, should be taken away. They also then davened that the Yetzer Hara for sexual activity should be taken away. The problem is the world didn't run well with that. Even the chickens stopped laying eggs. It wasn't a good situation. The world can't exist that way without those type of drives. So they davened it should come back, but it shouldn't be as strong as it was. So if we understand today that in the world as a whole, I'm not saying every individual, there are many very refined spiritual individuals, but the world as a whole, we see how strong the Yetzer Hara for sexual things are. Now, it's weakened than it was, and even when it was at full strength, it was second by a very large margin to the Yetzer Hara of idol worship. So you can imagine how powerful that desire was. So that went away. So that was the challenge in the first Beis HaMikdash, and this led to corruption. Once spirituality comes from different places, We had all these issues. Second Beis Hamikdash, we had these groups who wanted to change Torah to suit themselves. We'll loosely call them the Reform and Reconstructionists, and of like similar to today. It was different style, and some of them even tried to make themselves appear more from than the mainstream Judaism. But it had these certain groups. Now, where did it come from? Essentially, it really came from the Greek culture. The Greeks.
Rabbi?
Yes.
Are you referring to the Siddukim?
Yes. What's one of the groups? So I'm going to get into a few of them. Yeah.
I see. Okay.
So when the Greeks occupied Israel, pre-Hanukkah, we had a whole group of people called Misyavnim. The Hellenists. There were people who wanted to be more Greek than the Greeks, and they adopted this culture. Now, part of the Greek culture, unfortunately, was there were many nations we came in contact with that had their idols and different things, and it doesn't fit with Judaism. But the Greek culture was like pretty much the opposite of Judaism, right? Even in an idol worshiping place, they had their spirituality. It was misguided, but they had a desire to be spiritual, as misguided as it was. The Greek culture, they also offered sacrifices to idols, but the main thing was hedonism. It was material gratification. It was about the human lusts, and they, instead of trying to create themselves in God's image, they instead created gods, so to speak, in their image. So their gods do adultery, they fight with each other, they have wars, they kill family members. It's essentially just made more powerful versions of themselves. And this culture, unfortunately, through assimilation, crept into the Jewish people. And even after the Greeks were driven out, a lot of these people were left in powerful government positions. Right? One of the mistakes the Hashmonaim and the Maccabees made, and again, it's easy with 2020 hindsight to call it a mistake. People at the time can only make decisions based on what they think is right at the time. But one of the mistakes in the hindsight that they made was, once they took over, they didn't purge the government, right? You had all these Hellenists in charge of various things, and they thought to themselves, well, who are we going to put there instead? Yankel the farmer, he's a frum guy, he's honest, but what does he know about running the treasury or whatever government department? And so they left all these people in charge, and this led to an upper class that was still quite spiritually off. Okay, is everyone still there?
Yep.
Yeah, within freeze. Okay.
Yeah, we're still there.
Okay. So from here, okay, they couldn't call themselves Greeks anymore, but they had all these different groups. So the one we're going to mention is the Tzaddokim, the Sadducees, and I don't know if you call that English, but whatever, Greek originally, but part of English today. So what did they do? Right. So they wanted essentially live how they want. Now, they didn't deny that the actual Torah itself is not divine. They didn't say it's man-made like these groups do today. Right? They still admitted that it came from Hashem, but they said that the oral Torah, the explanations, that's not from Hashem. That's made up, they said. Now, this, of course, gave them their own problem, because without a Torah Shabbat Peh, without an oral explanation, the written Torah doesn't make sense. You can't understand it. So, for example, tefillin. says, Pshatam, right? You're tied. This is a sign on your hand. There'll be like a taitafos, a remembrance on your between your eyes. So if you don't have a oral Torah, you don't know what they even are. What are these things? So they made up their own oral Torah, their own oral tradition. Right? So they said there is no oral tradition. You have to take everything literally. So instead of wearing tefillin between your eyes, instead of that being on the hairline level with between the eyes, they actually put it between their eyes. So they claim they're more frum because we do everything literally. But in reality, they have to make up their own Torah. I was like, how do you even know it's tefillin? Right? And so on with many of the mitzvahs. But essentially, this gave them excuse to make up whatever explanation they want for anything, and they can do what they want. And it was just really continuation of the Hellenism. There were other groups as well, but one of the things that the document said or claimed is that there's no afterlife. Right? The truth is, without getting too sidetracked, the word afterlife doesn't really make sense in Judaism from a Jewish perspective, because afterlife presumes that the life ended and we're talking about afterwards, right? We look at ourselves as primarily being a soul, and the soul lived before it went into the body, and it continues to exist / live after it leaves the body. The body is just a pit stop. So it's not, from our perspective, it's not so much afterlife, it's really just the next stage of life. And you know, and we also have teachings along the lines of that this world is just a foyer to the next world, right? We need to prepare ourselves in this world to go to the main hall, right? So it's not only, it's a pit stop, it's not even the main place, right? Where the soul lives outside the body. That is our primary existence. This is just a short-term business trip, so to speak, to be able to gain mitzvahs and to accomplish something. So, but they wanted to say that once this person physically no longer lives in this world, that's it. That was one of their claims, and of course, one of the objectives, the ulterior motives behind that is to take away any sense of responsibility. Again, this is a continuation of the Hellenism. One of the things that we understand is that regardless of how we live our life in this world, we have to give some type of accounting of ourselves when we return back home, when the soul goes back to its source, where it comes from, to its spiritual existence. It has to give some type of reckoning of what it did in this world. Of course, if a soul really didn't complete its mission at all, it has to be reincarnated and comes back again. And generally speaking, even if we did do a pretty good job, we made mistakes along the way. I mean, no one's perfect, only Hashem is perfect. So we probably all made some mistakes. So we have a bit of spiritual dirt on ourselves. So we have to get cleaned, right? This is called Gehennims, where again, in the Western world, they take the idea of hell and they've twisted it and totally out of context. You know, Gehennim is a short-term cleansing period. It's not fun. No one enjoys getting scrubbed, and but it's ultimately it's to clean us up, positive. So there is some type of reckoning. Tzaddukim wanted to say, essentially, you can do whatever you like in this world, and you don't have to justify it to anyone. Once you're finished, it's all over. There's nothing else to no responsibility. Right? That was the ulterior motive. So, with that in mind, and again, so we're going to speak about the Beis Mikdash. So, in the first Beis Mikdash, right? Kol chais me Brochos of Mikdash haya oimim ad ha'olam. In all the blessings they said in the first Beis Mikdash, it concluded with the words ad ha'olam, until the world. Right? That's what you happen. You say, Baruch atah Hashem Elokei Yisrael. Ad ha'olam, they used to say. So, what happened? Shekal Kolol HaTzedokim. When the Tzedokim came, they tried to corrupt Judaism or corrupt the Jews. But Amru, and they said, Ein olam el echad. There's only one world. And once you leave this world, that's it. So therefore, his kino shai omnim, they, meaning the Anshe Knesset Gedolah, or after what it was, they changed. They concluded the blessing as follows: Min ha'olam va'ad ha'olam, from the world until the next world. Right? This was to emphasize to the masses, to the people, that there is in fact a spiritual existence as well as a physical existence. Okay. Any questions? Okay. Following on from this, again, this idea of respectfulness and in the base of Mikdash, various things, we know that one of the things we cannot do is use Hashem's name casually, because we need to show respect. We need to have a certain awe. So that's why, even in a doubt about a blessing, should I make a blessing? Which a blessing shows respect to Hashem. But if it's a doubtful situation, we don't say the blessing, even though a blessing would be respectful. But the problem with saying Hashem's name unnecessarily is larger issue than the respect shown by making the blessing. Nevertheless, continues the Mishnah, that we instituted that a person can greet another Jew with the name of Hashem. Right? So the name of Hashem. Now, you might think this is not respectful enough, but we see that it is respectful. To be the greet or bless another Jew with Hashem's name is respectful. How do we know this? Shnema. We have a verse. We have a verse in the Torah. This is from the Megillah of Rus. When Boaz is greeting his workers on his farm, he comes back, says, Boaz came from Beis Lechem, from Bethlehem, and he said to his harvesters, Hashem Menachem. He says, Hashem is with you. Right? He greeted them with Hashem's name. And they said back to him, they replied, Yevarech Hashem, may Hashem bless you. So we see from here, but we've got another verse. Because by the way, whenever we bring another verse as a proof, it shows that there's something wrong with the previous proof. Or perhaps not something wrong, but you might think it's not a proof for a certain reason. So therefore we bring another one. Right, so a person might have thought that it was just Boaz that it was like his thing. It wasn't necessarily something that you meant to do. Could have just because someone did something doesn't make it right. So therefore we bring another proof when Gidon, an angel came and met him, and he says, Hashem imcha gibor chayil. Hashem is with you, mighty man of valor. Right? Now, there's another proof. Why do we need another proof? We might have thought that only an angel can do that. We're going to show another proof. It says, don't shame her even though your mother might be old. Okay, so this shows that when we see that our sages, it's a metaphor. It says your mother. Means literally, a person shouldn't shame their mother, but it's also a metaphor for the sages. So when we see that the sages of old did something, for example, like Boaz, we see that there's a reason for it. We can follow it. The Oyman also says, Hashem, there's a time to act for Hashem. They nullified your laws. So even though it looks a little bit funny that Boaz used Hashem's name, but normally we don't do that to greet someone, but we see there's a time and a place. And since we mentioned that verse, Rabbi Nosson, he used the verse a little bit differently. So he says they nullified your laws because it's a time to act for Hashem. Here he's speaking about a situation where something out of the ordinary happens. So, for an example, we know that we're not allowed to bring. Once we've built the Beis Hamikdash, we're not allowed to bring an offering, a sacrifice outside the Beis Hamikdash. But Eliyahu Novi made a challenge to the worshippers of Baal, and they went on another mountain on Har Carmel, and they brought offerings. So even though you're not normally meant to bring offering, but this was exceptional circumstances. This was to publicly show that the Hashem is the true God and not the idols of Baal. There's a time and a place under extreme circumstances. But back to this idea, yes.
But in the situation with on Mount Carmel, wasn't, for all intents and purposes, the Beit HaMikdash compromised? So it was as if it wasn't there. And so therefore, for all, in that situation, you could say that you can bring a korban outside of the Beit HaMikdash because it was basically defiled by by the king and his wife and all the.
So even in the compromised situation, the Beis Hamikdash still holds precedence. To the extent that even today, the Beis Hamikdash is destroyed, doesn't exist at all, we still can't bring a korban outside the Beis Hamikdash. So once it was initially built, so we had a permission before it was built to have a bomber, this bomber, loosely called an altar, with two types, a personal one and a communal one. So we could have both. Once the Beis Hamikdash was built, now once it goes to the verses in the Torah speak about the place that Hashem chose, right? And eventually David HaMelech and his based in the Sanhedrin, they worked out what was that place. They eventually discovered it from various verses, and David went and conquered that. Well, bought it actually. They conquered the first section and bought that section, and then they once the altar went in that place, then there was no ability to have anything outside of that, whether it currently exists or doesn't exist. So even today, the Beis Hamikdash, we can't offer a sacrifice anywhere else. Non-Jews can, by the way. Non-Jews can bring a korban to Hashem if they want, but Jews can't. So even though it's true, it was compromised at that time, but the prohibition still applied. But this was an extreme circumstance.
I have something to say about that.
Yes.
I wanted to say they couldn't do it in Beit HaMikdash because it was a competition between a kosher korban and the non-kosher ones.
Yes,
So,
right. Well, obviously we couldn't have them bring
That's what I'm
sacrifices to
saying.
Baal in the Beis Hamikdash. That's true.
Right.
But that didn't mean that Eliyahu was allowed to bring the korban to Hashem outside the Beis Hamikdash.
The
You're
other
not.
thing is,
Yeah.
it would be like you're setting up a trial for the Beit HaMikdash. We don't have to try the Beit HaMikdash. We know that it's whatever happens in the Beit HaMikdash is truly happening. So we really didn't want to bring it in as a comparison to something else.
Yes, that's true. We couldn't have brought in the other things, but Eliyahu likewise was not allowed to, under normal circumstances,
Right,
have
right.
brought his carbon outside. But here we see
Right.
there's certain times, there's a time and a place. There's a time and a place where things are out of the normal, it's extreme circumstances, and therefore there's a time where things are permitted.
So the question that I have based upon what Ben said, did that mean that people who actually, let's say not every, if someone actually kept the laws, etc., and he did make a sin, where would he then? He would then bring it to the Beit HaMikdash, and where does it get sacrificed? Since that entire place is now offering to Baal, are they going to say, "Oh, this one specifically goes to God, and the others go to Baal"? So, I don't think that happened. Because any people who brought a korban would bring it to Baal, not to Hashem, and so therefore that place was completely, defiled. So where would anybody who wanted to bring a korban to Hashem go?
Yeah, I'm not sure that it quite got to that point, but even if it would have, so just like today, where we can't bring a korban, you have to wait until the circumstances allow us to bring korban. So,
Yeah, but aren't you bound by the fact that you also have to bring it within a certain number of
yes, but
regalim?
many of us are obligated to bring korbanos today. Many of us does something that we have to bring a chatas for. Women who've given birth need to bring offerings. Every time we bench goimel, we said the Thanksgiving bracha meant that we really need to bring a korban toida, the Thanksgiving offering. So every one of us probably has multiple korbanos that we're obligated to bring, but we can't. So we just wait till we can. So yes, and we have a time limit. We're meant to bring within a year, and a year means the 3 festivals in order, which can be almost 2 years. Right, in practice, because if you got the obligation or you committed the day after Pesach, you wait till the next Pesach for the year to go. So we all have those same time limits, but there's logistic issue. It doesn't exist. So if there really was a situation, most of the worshippers in Baal, they had their own temple. So there were problems in the Beis Hamikdash, certain corruption, but I'm not sure.
Is he frozen or is that just me?
Sorry. So I'm not sure that it got to the extent that you were saying. But even if it did, and therefore they couldn't bring, they just like we have to wait. They would have to wait. The circumstances changed. So that's how it ended up. Now, today we do greet people with Hashem's name, but not the actual name of Hashem. The word shalom, under certain circumstances, a certain context, is also a name of Hashem. So when we say shalom aleichem, we're actually greeting, our intention is that's Hashem's name. Just as a side point to this, it's interesting that when we greet someone, we say shalom aleichem. When they answer, they say aleichem shalom. They put it the other way around. And the reason for this is that, and by the way, we also see it in with Boaz, that he starts off with Hashem's name, and when they answer, they put Hashem's name later, and they say other words first. So the concern is that if someone starts off saying Hashem's name, potentially, as soon as they say Hashem's name, they could pass away and not finish the greeting. So instead of saying Shalom Aleichem, they'll just say Shalom, pass away, and they never did the greeting. So although you're allowed to use Hashem's name to greet someone, but if they didn't have a chance to finish the greeting, then they would have just said Hashem's name for nothing. So in concept, everyone should say Aleichem Shalom, should start off with the greeting. But our sages have said that someone who's in the middle of a mitzvah, they're safe while they're doing the mitzvah. So therefore, he's guaranteed, if he's greeting someone sincerely, he's always going to be able to finish off the Aleichem, he'll be able to say Shalom Aleichem. However, the person who's answering doesn't have that same guarantee because they didn't initiate the greeting. So they have to say Aleichem Shalom. Right? They have to first do the greeting and then say Hashem's name. Right, so it can, as we said, Shalom can be one of Hashem's names in certain contexts. Obviously we use the word Shalom in other contexts as well. But just as part of it, therefore, let's say, for example, in a public bathhouse or a mikveh or, places where you can't say Torah or you can't say Hashem's name, you can't say the name Shalom either, which presents a problem at certain times. One of my sons, his name is Shalom, right? So let's say I need him to do something, I need him to hurry up, so I got to say, hey, you go to the mikveh, for Shabbos or something. Hey, you, grab the towel, so something like that. We work it out, but that's it's one of Hashem's names.
So don't name anybody Shalom.
Look, there's perhaps a thought in that, but we know that the names, it's a Ruach HaKodesh. It's like a mini prophecy that a parents get. And actually, this particular son, Shalom, everyone's revealed time. So, sometimes I've had people ask me, they think a rabbi, say, do you ever have prophecy? So sometimes I get a little cheeky and answer, yes, 11 times. Because 11 children, we named them, had a Ruach HaKodesh. But this particular son, Shalom, the child before him was a girl. That we thought if it's going to be a boy, we're going to call Levi Yitzchok. Well, we had that name in mind. Yitzchok was my wife's grandfather, and Levi Yitzchok, the Berditcher Rebbe, we're descendants from the Berditcher Rebbe. So we thought we're going to call Levi Yitzchok. Anyway, it was a girl. Fine, the next one. So our son Shalom, the entire pregnancy, the intention was, if it's a boy, Levi Yitzchok. Comes the night before the bris. I'm sitting in my office in the shul. The rabbi's house is like right next door. And I had this thought, maybe we should call him Shalom. So I got up, I walked into the house to ask my wife what she thinks. And before I even have a chance to say anything, I walk in the door. My wife says, let's call him Shalom Dov Ber. So we got the Ruach Kodesh. We didn't have a choice not to call him Shalom. That's what happened. So good point you make that perhaps we don't call children Shalom, but when you get that Ruach HaKodesh, that's what you have to do. So there it is. All right. So it took us 3 days almost, but we finished the Mishnah. It is quite a long Mishnah. Any questions on the Mishnah before we start the Gemara? Okay. So the Gemara is going to go right back to the very first clause. So just to remind ourselves from 2 days ago, the first clause was that if you see a place where a miracle happened to the Jewish people, we say a bracha. We say, Baruch atah Hashem Elokeinu melech haolam. Blessed are you, Hashem, our God, King of the universe, she'asa nisan l'avoseinu b'makom hazeh, who performed a miracle in this place. And a continuation of that clause was that if we see a place in the land of Israel where idol worship has been uprooted from, there's also a blessing. So the Gemara asks, Man hali minli, where do we know this from? Now, often when we have a mitzvah, the Torah, the Gemara will ask what the source is. But here it's a bigger question. Can anyone have any ideas? What's the problem with this? These blessings that the Gemara is so shocked we have to find this source for. Can anyone see a fundamental difference between these two blessings and the other blessings in the Mishnah? Any thoughts?
No.
Okay. All right. So the fundamental difference is all the other blessings are current, right? Meaning there's lightning now. So we say the blessing. A person sees the ocean first time in 30 days. He's like, wow, look at the size of it. He's awestruck by the greatness of Hashem's created. So right now he has that feeling. But here it's past tense. It's like a bracha on the past. This miracle happened 2,000 years ago. It's not current. There's nothing current happening now. So where do we know that such a bracha is made? All other brachas are present tense. We're about to light menorah. This moment we make a bracha on the menorah. We make a bracha on the apple. We make the bracha right when we are going to eat it. If you make it an hour in advance, it doesn't help. You have to make another bracha again when you're about to eat it. Brachas all need to be current. So ask the Gemara, where do we know this idea from that we bless Hashem on a miracle that's not current, that it's in the past? So Amar Rabbi Yochanan. Rabbi Yochanan gives us an answer. Says the Amakra. It actually, we see this from a pasuk, from a verse in the Torah. What does it say? The Yomru Yisroi. And Yisroi said, so Yisroi, when he came and met the Jewish people, said that he came because he became aware of certain things. He became aware of the splitting of the sea and the war with Amalek, these miracles. And he came to Jewish people and he decided he's going to convert. And when he meets Moshe, he says,
he's the first one to say Baruch Hashem.
Correct. It says Baruch Hashem asher hitzel v'gomer. Right? Blessed is Hashem who rescued you. And the continuation of the verse, it means from under the hands of Egypt, right? All these miracles. Now, he wasn't there when it happened. It wasn't present. It wasn't currently happening. It had happened in the past. And we see that such a bracha is good. Now, the fact that he said it doesn't necessarily make it a good thing, but the fact that Hashem included it in the Torah, and the Torah's eternal set of lessons for us. So we see we need to do this. Okay, so that's the source. Now, of course, this source at first glance doesn't seem to be a good proof. Does anyone, can anyone think or suggest why perhaps it's not a good proof? Okay. All right, we all need more coffee this morning, whatever it is. So one of the issues is, when did the Mishnah say we say the bracha? Right? When do we say the bracha?
Before, no,
when we
while it's happening, maybe.
Well, no,
When-
but when
when
did the
we see
Mishnah
it.
say we say a bracha on the miracle?
when we see it,
Right, when you
When
see
we-
the place.
say in place. Yeah.
Now, when you see the place that the miracle happened, you say the bracha. And we ask, how do we know you do this? So we bring a pasuk, bring a verse from Yisroi. Was Yisroi at the place where the miracle happened? No, he
No.
wasn't. He wasn't there. You met them in the wilderness. So we ask a question. How do we know we say a bracha on when you see a place where a miracle happened? Oh, we see it, we learn it from Yisroi, but Yisroi was not at the place. So that's question number one. That all
Rabbi,
the
wasn't he one of
commentaries
the
ask.
wasn't he one of the advisors to Paro? So he could have been in Egypt when all of this happened.
Yeah, so it's a good question. I mean, there is such a midrash, but he left, right? Because he wasn't there when it happened, even though he was there before. He saw some of the suffering. That's true. But when he advised against throwing the children or killing the babies, it was unpopular. Pharaoh was not impressed with his going against him, and he had to flee. And that's how he ended up in Midian. So when all the miracles happened, he was already in Midian. He wasn't in Egypt. So that's.
But when he's saying the blessing, for sure he's not in Egypt.
Right. So all these miracles, he wasn't at the Red Sea. He's met the Jewish people at Mount Sinai, essentially. Now, there's going to be miracles there, but that's not the miracles that he's thanking Hashem for. So some of the commentaries, the Ritva, the Meiri, the Marsha, they say when you see the beneficiary of a miracle, it's the same thing. So he saw the actual Jews who this miracle happened to. That's the same idea, seeing the place. Now today, let's say we would, if we knew the exact place where the splitting of the sea happened, we don't know the exact place. There are certain theories and the circumstantial evidence, but we don't know the exact place. So since we don't know the exact place, it's going to be a doubtful bracha. We're not going to say it today. Although there are some people who are confident enough, there are certain groups who go there and say the blessing. But let's leave that aside. But in concept, the people who went through the sea, they're not with us anymore. So we only have the place. But if we would be able to see those people, right? We lived back then. Seeing those people, same as seeing the place. In other words, what's special about the place? Oh, this is where the miracle happened. When you see the actual people happen to, oh, these are the people that happened to. So it's the same concept. The reason the Mishnah doesn't mention seeing the people is because by the time we get to the Mishnah, all those people have long since passed away. So it's practically irrelevant. But in concept, it's the same thing. So that's why it's approved. So that's answer number one. Answer number two, this is pointed out by the Marsha. It says that although Yisro said a bracha, he didn't say Elokeinu melech ha'olam. He didn't say God's sovereignty. In other words, he said an incomplete bracha. So we see, okay, because he wasn't at the place. So we said incomplete bracha. Nevertheless, he said something. So from here, it's a proof if we were, since he said a partial bracha when he met the people, even not in the place. For sure, if we're in the place, we say a full and complete bracha. So that's the answers to the questions. All right. Now, the next point we're going to say is we're going to put in the criteria for when do we say this blessing. So in the Mishnah it said a place where a miracle happened to Yisrael. Now, therefore the Gemara comments, and this is the Rabbim of our, when do we say a blessing? When it happened to the masses. And this is the Yochid Loim Avarchinu. A blessing that happened to an individual, we don't say a blessing. Right? So again, when we studied the Mishnah together, we gave a definition of what does that mean of the people, and we discussed it. It means even happened to one tribe, either one tribe in majority of one tribe, or the majority of the entire Jewish people. Each one of those is called the nation. That's when it happened to the people. So the Gemara has made a statement. We make a bracha on a place where a miracle happened to the Jewish people as a whole, but not in a place where a miracle happened to an individual. The Gemara straight away has a question on this statement. How can you make this statement? Bahu Gavra, we know that there was a certain individual, he was traveling through a place called Eva Yamina, and a lion attacked him. He got attacked by a lion. A miracle happened, and he was saved from the lion. We're not being told what the miracle was, but generally speaking, when an individual and a lion have a wrestling match, the lion wins. But Baruch Hashem, in this case, there was a miracle, and the person came unscathed from this attack by a lion. So also the Kami the Rava, he came to Rava and he told him what happened. But Amalei, and Rava said back to him, whenever you go back to that place, whenever you pass that place, you arrive, you're there, you have to make a bracha. What's the bracha? Baruch she'asa li neis b'makom hazeh. Blessed you Hashem, who performed a miracle for me at that place. So we just said, when do you say a bracha? The Gemara says, what's the definition in the Mishnah? Only a place where a miracle happened to the Jewish people as a whole, not a place where a miracle only happened to an individual. And yet here we see, we tell people a miracle happened to them as an individual to say a bracha. Now, we're going to give another example or two as well. I don't want to leave people in suspense till tomorrow. So I'll let you know the answer, even though we're not going to get to that today. And we'll cover it again tomorrow, is that it's two different situations. A miracle happened to an individual. That individual says a bracha when he goes to that place.
Right.
So if a miracle happens to me, then I'm obligated, only me, to say a blessing at that place. Possibly my descendants. We're going to have such a discussion. But at least descendants that wouldn't exist if the miracle didn't happen to me. But at least I'm obligated, but no one else is. A place where a miracle happened to the Jewish people as a whole, then everyone's obligated. So when the Gemara here makes a statement that it's only a place, it says when the Mishnah says a miracle happened to Yisrael, that means a place, the Jewish people as a whole. He's just giving a definition of what everyone has to do. It's not a contradiction to the fact that an individual is going to say a blessing on a place where a miracle happened to them. So we've still got another minute or so we'll squeeze in a bit more. So before the Gemara actually gets to the answer, continues the question, and it gives another example. There was this incident that this individual, Mar, the son of Ravina, he was traveling through the valley of Arabas, and he had no water. There was no rainfall, there was no wells. He was dying of thirst. He ran out of water. And a miracle happened. And a well of water was created for him. All of a sudden, the spring came out of nowhere. It didn't exist 2 minutes ago. And he drank. So another miracle happened. And yet another time, something else happened with the same fellow, the same Mar, the son of Ravina, who was traveling through the marketplace in the city of Mechoisa, and a wild camel attacked him. They're dangerous, those camels. Right? So a wild camel attacked him, and this parakale ishisa, and a wall split open for him. And and he went inside and he escaped the camel. There was this wall, he had nowhere to escape. All of a sudden, the wall split, he got inside, and he was saved. Now, he also in the future, after that, whenever he came to Arabas where the spring of water came, he would make a blessing. Baruch she'asa li neis b'arabas. Yeah. So let's finish here because it's time. We'll continue.
I have one
tomorrow.
question, if I
Please.
may.
Please.
Avram Avinu, after the Akedah, called the place Hashem Yireh.
Yeah.
That's a shame, Hashem.
So then you're saying because he's gonna say Hashem's name. Now, on a simple
Anybody
level,
else will.
Yeah.
also.
On a simple level, we could just simply answer that before the Torah was given, so that there wasn't such an issue. But on a deeper level, in this case, because it's referring to the fact that there was this revelation, it in itself, by mentioning it, it is an honor to Hashem's name. You know, it's like base kale, right? Although we say base kale, but it's like the house of God. You know, we're saying so. You know, it would be like, just to give an example. You know, I don't know. There might be a place where someone fought a great war, and his name was Fred, and he was the hero, and they call it Fred's Hill. I don't mean to simplify, you know.
No, I understand.
Yeah, so it gives honor to this person. So in this case, you know, Lahavdil, it's showing such a great thing that happened there. It's actually an honor to Hashem.
Shkayach.
You're very welcome. So to be continued, well, again this afternoon we'll try and finish the halachas of Tisha B'Av, God willing, and then tomorrow morning the last session before the break.
All right.
So we look forward to seeing
great.
everybody. Have an incredible day.
Thank you. Bye-bye,
Thank you,
everyone.
Rabbi. Have a
Bye-bye.
great day.
Bye, Rabbi.
Thank you, Rabbi. Thank you, Rabbi.
You're welcome.